While 2016 saw a record number of voters overall in the presidential election, there was one key constituency in which turnout fell. For the first time in 20 years, fewer black voters cast the ballot in 2016, and that's a trend Get Out the Vote groups were looking to reverse in 2020, especially with more than a third of registered black voters living in one of 9 battleground states. And as AP race and ethnicity writer Kat Stafford tweeted, she spoke with many sources who said it's either the greatest irony or indictment of America that this election could come down to cities like Detroit, Philly, Milwaukee, etc., cities with significant black populations that bore the brunt of our nation's 3 simultaneous crises. She later noted the significant role that Atlanta, too, is playing in the ultimate outcome of this race. I'm joined by LaTosha Brown, co-founder of the Black Voters Matter Fund, a nonprofit aimed at increasing voter engagement. LaTosha, it's been a while. I'm glad to see you.
Glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming. How much did black voters matter yesterday and in the lead up to yesterday?
I think significantly. I think what we're going to see is when you look at the gains in Wisconsin, we are looking at Michigan. I think it's going to make the difference between what happens in Michigan. I think Georgia is in play and has not been called right now simply because of the turnout of black voters. And so I think black voters have had an extraordinary impact on this election cycle. I think even more so, when you think about many of the states that we worked in 15 states, and as we were talking to people, folks were very, very concerned about COVID-19. They were very concerned about the future of this country. Mm-hmm. And black voters, many black voters who are infrequent voters were saying that they were going to vote for the first time. Some of them were voting for the first time. Some of them had decided that they were going to vote because they knew how critical this election was.
You wrote a piece, I think it was in Essence magazine, with an opening line recently. I'm not asking black voters to show up for the Democratic Party. I'm asking black voters to show up for black folks. What does that mean? What did you mean?
What I meant by that, I think oftentimes when we're looking at politics, we're looking at the political parties or candidates, when fundamentally all of this is about people. When you look at COVID-19, it has been devastating to our community, right? When we're looking at not just only the what we've dealt with in terms of contracting it at disproportionate numbers and disproportional deaths, but when you also look at the economic impact it's had on us, that 50% of black businesses are projected that they will close because of COVID-19. When you look at the racial tension that is happening in this country right now. One of the polling sites that our people were working with in North Carolina, Trump supporters came through that polling site and was spitting on people. And so there is an enormous amount of racial tension in this country right now. There's an enormous amount of pain that our community is feeling. And so for me, when I was telling people to vote, I wanted people to vote where they center the issues of our community. They center the issues of humanity, and that would drive their vote, not political parties or even candidates for that matter, but that we center politics on for the love of humanity, and we make a vote based on that.
You may have touched on what I want to talk about next. I assume everybody knows that for decades and decades, voter suppression efforts in this country have been targeted particularly at people of color. Was yesterday and the lead up to yesterday any different than the past?
No, I actually think it's intensified in recent years. I mean, we just saw, we're fresh from the eve in which there were over 100,000 votes in Houston County, a city in Houston, a city that has a large black population, where the Republicans in that state wanted to throw out over 100,000 votes that were cast. And so we're seeing these challenges, particularly in these areas that are considered urban centers. And I do think voter suppression, we've seen this over the last couple of months. We've had to sue states. We have walked up to people who are telling us that they registered and they never got their registration form. People have been dropped from the voting rolls. Voter suppression is the biggest threat to unraveling democracy in this country, and our community has been targeted.
One of the heartening things about, though, that Harris County thing, if there's anything heartening, is those 127,000 voters who voted curbside voting, perfectly legal. Their right to do that was upheld by a state Supreme Court that was 100% Republicans elected by the people of Texas, which I thought was a good moment. You know, despite the losses of people like Mike Espy in Mississippi, Jamie Harrison, who a lot of people had huge hopes for in his race against Lindsey Graham, the Associated Press reported that there were the greatest number of black candidates for office in the Deep South since Reconstruction. So on balance, was yesterday a net plus in terms of black candidates, or was the loss of by people like Harrison so stinging that there's no such thing as a net plus?
No, I absolutely believe that's progress. You know, my grandmother would say, mighty rivers are filled drop by drop. The fact that Jamie Harrison came up, let's see, he went one of the most powerful men in the Senate, right? He went up against a black man in South Carolina having that kind of showing, and Mike Espy in Mississippi having that kind of showing, in communities in states that have been solid red. And these are people who have an enormous amount of power currently in the Senate. I think that what we're looking at is we're looking at a transformative moment. We're looking at a transitional moment. And so we can't just judge the future of those states or the future of this country based on one election. What I think that what we're seeing from the shift in the House of Representatives where there are more women, when we're seeing the shift where we're seeing more black candidates, I think that people are looking for a more reflective democracy. And I think as we go forward and continue to organize, we're going to see more representatives of people of color in government.
When you and your people in your organization are trying to convince a black voter that their vote matters, and they say to you, blacks, men and women, have been the most reliable piece of the Democratic Party forever, and we believe that rarely is that debt repaid, what do you say to them?
What we say to them is we understand exactly what you feel, and we do believe that there's a level of truth of what you're saying. What we're asking you to vote for, just like I raised in the Essence magazine, we're not asking you to vote or to believe in a system that you have seen constantly be prejudiced towards you. What we're asking you to do is believe in your own agency, that if any decision is going to be made by me, that I want to make sure that I am a part of that decision-making process. And so as we talk to the voters that we're meeting, what we do is we shift the center of gravity to really talk about the focal point being them, beyond the political parties. And if we are to see change in the political parties and the kind of candidates, then that means that we have to show up, use our power, and really be able to demand that those changes happen, not just election time, but within the parties.
If Joe Biden becomes president, will he repay the debt? I mean, pretty powerful that he said repeatedly the reason he decided to run was what he saw out of Charlottesville. He's talked about race dramatically and relentlessly in this campaign. He picked the first black woman to be on a ticket. Will he take this obligation seriously? Should he prevail here?
I am very hopeful that Joe Biden will do that. He is certainly different from the president we currently have. I think that there's a lot of possibilities and a lot of potential. And I also think that as citizens, we have to continue. It doesn't matter who wins, that ultimately we still have to hold electeds accountable. But I certainly believe that he has shown and demonstrated that he is distinctively different from President Trump. And I have a lot of hope that with us really engaging in this process, that people who are holding electeds feet to the fire, that we're going to see something different.
Kamala Harris was asked in a 60-minute interview the other day, a couple of Sundays ago, if she thought Donald Trump was a racist. I assume she might dance around the answer. She answered it in laser-like fashion by saying yes. Whether he comes in second or first, he's going to get close to Donald Trump, close to 50% of the vote of our fellow Americans. What does that say to you about America in 2020, LaTosha?
You know, what's really interesting is today, all day today, I've been thinking, I really firmly believe that Vice President Biden is going to pull this out. I actually think that he will be the nominee. He will be the president of the next president. Mm-hmm. But I am heartbroken. I wish I could come and give a big political speech to say what is the possibility. I am heartbroken. The fact that we are at 50% of this country would stand with a man who lacks integrity. The fact that 50% of this country would stand with a man who has been stoking racial fear and racial division, right? All of those things are very deeply troubling to me. What I do think has happened is that even today, I actually have cried for hours, that even today I had to really think about that structural racism right, is so embedded in the culture of this country that it is going to have to take people, everyday people, a coalition of folks who have the right spirit and the right mind to really be able to come up against this. But it's so embedded in the culture of this country that it's going to take remarkable change. So yes, in many ways, what it is extremely disturbing. He has been open. He's actually used racism as a tool and a vehicle to really be able to organize folks. And the fact that 50% of people in this country, and the majority of white Americans, will stand aligned with a man who has shown a lack of character, no integrity, and has been openly racist and misogynist is very heartbreaking.
I want you to know, LaTosha, and if in a weak moment I'm ever thinking of not voting, I'm calling you on the phone. I want to make that clear. LaTosha Brown, it's great to see you as always. Thanks so much for your work and your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.